start of this taping, I talked about aerating using 2 buckets so that the yeast have plenty of oxygen. While that work chiller is outside cooling our holiday Hefeweizen beer, this has been a bucket we prepared in the very beginning with Star San, so it's ready to go. This is a fresh bucket that has not been sanitized yet, and the lid has not been sanitized yet either. So our job is to get the beer ready, get the equipment ready for the beer to make sure everything is well sanitized. My hands are clean, and this is going to sanitize my hands as well. And because I'm going to be using the buckets to pour from bucket to bucket, I want to make sure that the buckets are completely sanitized as well, both buckets. The trick I like to do is actually turn the buckets as I'm pouring like this, just to make sure that the entire thing is well saturated. Not a whole lot of foam left in there. When you're doing the lids, it's okay to get them in and turn them. Don't push too far in. You don't want to deform the lid or the bucket. But you want to make sure that the area that the seal is in is completely submerged, because that's a very important part of your lid that's going to be in contact with your beer possibly. And then, of course, we have the spray bottle that we prepared earlier. This is where it really comes in handy. You just let that sit until we're ready to use it. I'm going to do the same with this bucket here. And at this point, our buckets are sanitized, both of them. I don't need the sanitizing solution. I can go ahead and pour it out or put it into a third bucket to save for next time I need it, say bottling day. As long as Star San is covered, it can last a couple of months, and it will actually let you know when it needs to be replaced, because it's going to get cloudy. It's going to get cloudy, kind of like a cloudy, rainy, drizzly day. Other than that, it's going to be clear while it's still good. So I really don't need Star San for anything else today. If I do need it to take a temperature reading or something, I've got it in my spray bottle, so I don't have to sit there and go, oh my gosh, I just poured out 5 gallons of Star San. What am I going to do? I've got to make another 5-gallon batch. So while we're waiting, let's talk a little bit about what it takes to get a beer fermenting quickly. We talked about the fact that the sooner you cool the wort, the less chance there is of outside bacteria or wild yeast getting into your beer. But as far as the start of fermentation, that's important too. And I found that the closer everything is to your fermentation temperature, when you pitch the yeast, the faster your yeast is going to start. We're going to be using a dry yeast for this. This is the Safe Brew WD06 wheat beer yeast. With the dry yeast, you don't need to do a yeast starter. With liquid yeast, you pretty much do. But if the room temperature is, say, 68 degrees, which is about where we're at now, your fermentation temperature is going to be about 68 degrees. Your wort is chilled to 68 degrees. Typically, it's not unusual with the dry yeast to start seeing airlock activity as soon as an hour from pitching time. If your wort is not at fermentation temperature, the yeast realize there's temperature changes going on. They're going to actually tend to wait until there's stabilization in their temperature before they start reproducing and start fermenting your beer. So we'll come back and stir this some more. Help speed the process of cooling. Again, we don't have to worry about hot side aeration now because the temperature is low enough. We can actually start building some foam into our wort. At this point, this is so thick and viscous, we're not going to really have a lot of bubbles forming regardless. So this half-inch silicone tube is going to attach to the outside of our kettle, and it's going to transport wort. So obviously we've got to make sure this thing is fully sanitized.
going to be fermenting this beer at 68, so I'd like to get this as close to 68 as possible. We do have some water we're going to add to this, so we're at 71 degrees. I'm going to call that close enough right now. So we're going to go ahead and turn off our work chiller and bring the beer back inside.
Beautiful things about having the false bottom in there. We still have a bag of hops and a big bag of fruit in there. Normally we'd have to remove those or we'd be worried about clogging the dip tube. We don't have to worry about that in this situation. We take our sanitized bucket and our sanitized hose. Best to be thoroughly sanitary about everything we do. Put that on there. And normally what I would do is I would transfer everything that comes out of here through a nylon bag like this to weed out any proteins that I want to keep out of my fermentation. Because we put everything into their own bag, it's not that big a deal. Plus we're using a false bottom, which is also going to trap some of the true proteins on top of it. You'll notice in the bottom of the bucket that there's Star San solution foamy, and it's not a big deal to have that. Like they say, don't fear the foam. Don't have it overly too much because obviously you're going to pick up some of that sour taste. But we're ready to start draining this. We're making a fruitcake beer, and part of what we want to do is take the actual fruitcake fruits out of the boil kettle and put them into the fermentation bucket. But one of the things I like to do is go back and forth between two buckets to aerate the wort. So I don't really want to put that fruit in there right now. So I can either leave it in the kettle and then pull it out after it's ready to go with my hand sanitized, or I can get rid of it right now and just let it sit on the sanitized bucket lid. I want to make sure my hands, which are still clean, are sanitized. And I'm going to pull out the fruit. Now again, we don't want to squeeze this either. We do want to get all that goodness that's in that fruitcake fruit. By the way, fruitcake fruit is mostly orange peel, lemon peel, some maraschino dehydrated cherries, things like that. So I was actually worried that the preservatives in fruitcake fruit were going to keep the yeast from starting up, but luckily I guess the boil prevents that from happening. So our wort is now transferred from the bucket, or the kettle rather, and we're going to top off to the 5-gallon mark with nice cold Alhambra water. And let's see if we can... We're right at 2 gallons. I've got 3 gallons here, so everything went according to plan. Okay. We are right there. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to rinse and sanitize our spoon. Give this thing a good mix. And we are going to take a sample for our gravity